Hello and welcome to the Crystal Confab. I'm Kyle, the Crystalline Mage, and I'm joined by Ashley Levy, Nicholas Pearson, and Adam Barralet, my crystal besties, as we dive into back to our regular programming, one mineral per episode. And today is honestly one of my personal favorites. And I'm sure you've heard us all say that several times over the episodes, but it truly is. And it's Danburite. And it's one that I wear often and regularly. And we are going to pass straight over to Ashley, who's literally direct from Tucson to have a little chat.
It was such a fun show this year. There was so much to see. There's always a lot of excitement come Tucson time. I think, both for shop owners like myself who are going over there to, source things for our sales and storefronts, as well as for the vendors that are traveling from all over the world to come to the show, show what they have, get to introduce new things. There was a lot of excitement and a lot of buzz this year. I think a few trends that I noticed that I wanted to share were I saw definitely more push for ethically sourced minerals this time, which I have to say was really great. Like several of the vendors that I've been going to for years that do ethical sourcing had more availability than what they've ever had before, which is really cool. And a few other vendors who have kind of tried to do that in the past, but maybe not across the board, have found new sources, new suppliers, new cottage miners to work with who are doing things a lot more ethically. I've also talked to a few vendors this year who changed the way that they're manufacturing, which is huge. So they're doing a lot of it in-house, so they have more oversight. Like those are the kind of changes that I get really excited about seeing. And I know that that comes from consumers, who are purchasing retail, like the end consumer level, putting pressure on the storefronts, and then those storefronts putting pressure on their sources, and also the work of amazing people like Nairi from Crystal Auras by Nairi, who just had World Crystal Healing Day, the first ever, who are just champions of ethical sourcing. And so I think we're starting to see the very beginning of that, which is interesting because we were just talking about this in a recent episode. So that was awesome. The other thing that I noticed is that a lot of the vendors were trying to get new things out there. There were a couple cool new finds. So from the DRC, there is a botrytis malachite with kind of a druzy quartz coating that was absolutely stunning. The first time I've ever seen it. There was incredibly high grade pink aragonite, like nothing I've ever seen. Way out of my budget personally, but it's great to look at. There was also this really cool combo of chrysocolla, kind of that chalky botrytis crust chrysocolla and cobaltoin calcite crystals growing together with this intense blue and pink in one cluster. So those were some of my fun new finds for this year that I was excited to see. But there were also some things I wasn't thrilled about, including some crystal fakes. So many of us have probably seen over the last 18 months to 2 years this honeycomb ruby. And it is touted as being natural ruby. It kind of looks like a lava rock that is dyed hot pink, if you can picture what that might look like in your head. It's quite heavy because it is actually corundum. It just happens to be lab grown, if I'm not mistaken about that. Nicholas, Kyle, can you confirm? Nicholas has something to add.
Yeah, so I investigated this. It's the same ingredients as corundum, but it lacks the crystal structure. It's essentially made from powdered aluminum oxide and powdered chromium oxide. You get the ratio just right and you flash heat it, and that's why it's got that kind of bubbly texture, because it cools so rapidly, the bubbles are still present.
So it is just like cooked. It is cooked. Yeah.
It is possible to make this in a microwave at home. I've seen demonstrations.
Whoa. Okay. Learning new things from Nicholas every episode, but that was a big one. So the same ingredients, not the same structure, which to me not the same crystal. So not going to work with it. It feels weird. It looks weird. It's kind of scratchy, like and sharp. It's an odd thing. So be on the lookout for that. It's being sold as natural all over. It was all over at the shows. So that means if you find some in your local Christmas crystal shop, don't be surprised if you see it labeled as natural. It's probably not the shop's fault. They were probably just told that. So give people the benefit of the doubt, but do a little bit of friendly education if you get the opportunity. The other one that I saw, and I saw it for the first time last year, just at one place, all of a sudden it was everywhere, is composite lepidolite. So they are taking lepidolite crumbs, gathering them up with purple glitter and resin and forming them into spheres, towers, palm stones, you name it. It is atrocious. It is not nice at all. You can actually see the bits of glitter in there, and they are actual bits of little plasticky, flashy glitter. So, not nice. I saw that just labeled as lepidolite all over the place, and then also as recon lepidolite. So if you see that, there is a bit of lepidolite in it. You can see some bits. It's probably just all the stuff that's sitting at the bottom of the bin after they, do a big shipment, after they process some, they're turning it into something else. It's not that it's not, well, I don't find it pretty. Some people might find it pretty, interesting to look at, but not a real crystal. So keep on the lookout for that. And I think that is it for new trends and some crystal fakes to look out for.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for that. And I think, like you were saying, some of these fake crystals do have elements of the real crystal in them. But I think one thing that makes a crystal magical is the fact that it actually grew within Mother Earth over thousands upon thousands, if not longer years type of thing. And that gives it the final energy in that way. So it's not just the actual makeup, but it's that energy as well. Now, obsidians, would be an exception to that rule, but they're still birthed by Mother Earth in one of her actions in that way. So, no, there's lots of fake crystals out there. We've talked about it in the past before. If you like them, go for them. But as a confab group, we all give it thumbs down. And yeah, I know I was sending vomit emojis to Ashley as she was posting the fake ruby on her Instagram throughout the week. So yeah, totally up to everyone, but it's good to be educated to know exactly what you're buying. And I love what you mentioned, Ashley, about sometimes shops just don't know because they have to trust their vendors, and somewhere along the line, someone's told them this truth, and it may not be that final shop. So yeah, that was awesome. But
Well
should we talk
said.
a little?
And I have to jump in real quick and just say it reminds me of this whole thing where we see fuchsite being labeled as emerald all the time. And that's because somewhere along the way, one of the big distributors, who I will not name here and call out, but they called it emerald fuchsite because it's emerald colored fuchsite. And one of the other distributors bought a bunch, dropped the fuchsite part of it, which is what it is, and now everyone just sells it as emerald all the time, and that's not at all what it is. So we have to just be careful with those things.
Wow, wow. Well, we're going to lift our vibration a little bit because we're talking about a beautiful high vibration crystal today, Danburite. Did you see any Danburite at the show, Ashley? And how do you normally work with Danburite?
I did finally find some Danburite at the show. I was actually on the lookout for some because it is, like Kyle said, also one of my favorite crystals. This is a piece that I got many years ago now, maybe about 10 or 15 years ago. This is from Mexico. I also have some from Ohio here in the United States. It is a beautiful crystal. This one has a very ever so slight pink color to it, but only if you hold it up to a bright white paper. Uh, Filled with rainbows. And I just love the crystal structure of these. If you are watching the video version, you can actually see this nice kind of shovel point that it has. And I find that Danburite, with that formation, helps us dig down to the root of what matters, dig down to what is kind of waiting inside of us to come to the surface in terms of our purpose, our drive, our passion. This is a crystal that's always been sort of a guiding light for me when I feel really lost. when I feel disconnected from that part of myself that's kind of tuned into my inner guidance. And we've all had those times where we feel a little uncertain, we feel a little disconnected. I know there are times in my life when I have felt so certain and so guided about what my next step should be, and other times where I really wasn't sure. And that is really disheartening, right? Especially when you've had that experience of being so in flow and so connected and in tune with what you should be doing, to have a question mark after that feels scary. And Danburite is one of those crystals that I think helps sort of bring that up out of you if you've been feeling a little uncertain. So I think especially right now, this is a great crystal to turn to give you a little bit of direction, but really direction that is coming from inside of you. If you just can't quite find it, you can't quite connect or tune in, this is a crystal that you can sit with in meditation and sort of listen for that guidance. We've also talked about doing, what is often called like automatic writing or some journaling, just letting that sort of pour out. Ask yourself the question, where is my soul path taking me? What am I supposed to be doing right now? What is the most important thing for me to focus my energy on? There are a myriad of ways that we can phrase this question. So find the thing that feels right to you, work with your Danburite, and wait for that answer to come. And again, maybe this is tuning in and listening if you're maybe more a little clairaudient. Maybe this is doing some journaling, some reflection, writing it out. Maybe this is talking with a close friend, a family member. Because here's what I will say. That knowledge, that know-how, that thing that you really need to be doing, that thing that you need to work toward or move toward, get more in alignment with, it's inside of you. You just have to find out how to tap into it again. And it's normal for all of us to get disconnected at one time or another, but I know that Danburite has helped me on more than one occasion get back into that path.
Actually, you're saying that one of your Danburites has got that slight pink in it. Do you find that that pink alters the energy at all?
Yeah, I found that the crystals that have that little bit of pink are a little bit softer. They're a little bit more gentle. It's kind of like the difference between maybe a parent who would kind of tell you what you should be doing and one who might help just nudge you along and lead you to discover something for yourself. I think that's a little bit more what the pink Danburite does.
I love that. And Carl, I think you find this, is it being a cleared crystal that you find it a real nice clarifying one?
I find, honestly, all flavors of Danburite that I have worked with all bring this amazing directness. I think that chisel shape, that blade shape that we can see, this is also a Mexican piece. It has that soft pink. It's actually a twin. This is one of those things that you'll hear me mention over and over again is I find twinned crystals. This is another twin crystal. This one has a sidecar. This is like my first Danburite that I got. This sort of double up is always important to me, but it cuts through. It's like, I like to think of it as like a hot knife through butter, or a machete through the jungle. It really helps to just cut through things easily where it can be easy already or difficult. It doesn't really matter the situation. I will always wear this when I'm doing readings. Whenever I'm doing readings, whenever I'm doing psychic readings, I always wear my Danburite because it allows me to make sure I have that like clarity, but that direct connection to the information that I need to hear that cuts out all of the noise. For me, it's all about cutting out the distraction, cutting out the noise, allowing you to create that directness that you need to get to the point. As Ashley was sort of saying, it helps you to sort of find that clarity that you're craving. And what was really interesting is I did a little bit of research because I just wanted to do a little bit of research just for my own. And it is a, let me remember. I write things down and then I forget about it. It is a complex boron silicate with calcite. Calcite, boron, and silica is its makeup. These things are three things that go into fertilizers. And there are fertilizers that have exactly those three things. And it's a targeted fertilizer that helps with crop resilience and maximizing productivity. Like, it blew my mind when I read that. I'm like, that's Danburite for me. Like, it helps you to be resilient and stronger as you grow, as you evolve, as you become more yourself. And it helps you to then create more, do more, because all of that extra noise of doubt is gone. All of that chaos, all of that excess, you can just focus and bring it to the surface. And I love that. Like, I love the idea of something being fertilizer, something that nourishes us. And I think we're always so focused on the end result, focused on how we feel right now. And it's not to say how we feel right now isn't valid, but it is to say, what are you doing to nurture yourself as you go along? What can you keep giving yourself? What's going to support you and sustain you? Things that have a little bit of longevity, things that have a little bit more cadence are really, really important. And we need to remember that cyclically, not everything happens at once. Not everything's going to happen directly. And if we can give space over to this is what I need to do now, I'm in a growing phase. So I'm going to make sure I'm giving myself what I need to grow. Or I'm in a flowering phase. So I need X, Y, Z. Giving yourself what you need in the moment will always get you to that result. And I find Danburite is always a positive source of energy for what do I need now to work on what am I doing right now? It's less about the past and getting caught up, especially in what has happened. I feel it's almost pragmatic in a way, like it allows you to know what you can do. It allows you to know where you can direct your energy. I have a couple of pieces, if I don't know if you can see it, these have pyrite inclusions, tiny little pyrite inclusions. And I love that idea of being able to manifest through our spiritual side, through our esoteric information, our psychic information, and bringing through all of that stuff that helps you to get over what's logical. Like, even though it has a pragmatic side, I find Danburite helps you to get away from what is necessary and logical. Like, this is what I feel like I need. This is how I'm going to allow myself to flow forward. And I always find it less when I need to be logical. I often don't wear my Danburite. I often am not touching it. I am often not needing it, because if I'm at work doing my thing where I need to look at numbers and selling and blah, 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 I don't need my Danburite there. But when I'm doing my readings, when I'm doing my one-to-one, when I'm doing my lives every Sunday, I will wear my Danburite because it gives me that, this is what I need now. This is where I'm at now. This is clear. This is connected. And this is free from any doubt that may come my way. And I find if doubt is something that is omnipresent in your life, it's something that comes up, Danburite is such a positive aid. And this is where I think especially the soft blue, gray Danburite that comes from Bolivia really comes into its own. Is it's sort of this nurturing softness that allows you to sort of flow really beautifully whilst being trusting in your soul and what it's telling you and where it's taking you, because the doubt often comes up when the soul tries to take you somewhere and we go, no, that's scary. Oh no, what's going to happen? Oh no, people are going to look at me funny. Yes, they probably are, but it's still going to be really good for you. So why don't you do the thing, right? Why don't you actually cut through all the BS, all the noise, all the what everyone else is doing, and actually make things happen? And then there's also our golden Danburite, which is Russian in origin. And this for me is, I would say its closest relative would be Imperial Topaz in how it works, but still they're not the same. Golden Danburite for me is a enlightened energy. It really is a lift. It really is a buoyancy, and it helps to see sort of positive ways forward and positive actions. And I can, not I can't, which I really, really adore. I love them as a family. I think they're all amazing. As I said, I wear it whenever I do this sort of work. So I think it's great. If you are a practitioner, a medium, a psychic, and maybe you want to dive into that further, create more clarity in that way, I can definitely recommend it.
I should have had a trigger warning at the start of this episode because I forgot. Well, I often am reminded of something that happened with me and some golden Danburite. So I did a stint of living in the Middle East in the country of Bahrain for 18 months just a couple of years ago. And moving over there, I just had to take my most important crystal. So that was one big flat, and it probably was about half the weight of what I'd travel over there with. Anyway, It was in my bedroom, in a wardrobe, in the apartment I was staying in, that type of thing. One day I'm just rushing around and I was running late to get out to an appointment. And just as I'm about to step out the door, I hear this bang crash, as though someone had just broken into my apartment. Now, I was on the eighth level, so that hadn't happened. So I quickly dashed down to the bedroom at the far end of the apartment, and the top shelf in the wardrobe where the crystals sat was that flat of all my crystals had fallen to the ground. Now, this had all my pendants, my high-end pendants, my favorite tumbles, everything that I could kind of use for my YouTube videos and everything for that year. And I just kind of looked at it and went, oh my God, everything looks kind of okay. I'll deal with that when I'm back. And I remember the ride back home 3 hours later just going, oh my God, I wonder how they all are. Everything survived apart from a slice of labradorite and this beautiful golden Danburite pendant, which was large. And I've been trying to find something online since, and it was just amazing. But I love golden Danburite for that. Like you said, Kyle, it is such a happiness crystal. For those that are into the tarot, if I had to associate a crystal with the Sun card in the Major Arcana, probably golden Danburite would really bring in that energy of it. It's got this light, powerful happiness, hasn't it? But it's also almost like childlike and innocent at the same time, and really pure. I love it.
Absolutely. Super playful, being in the moment in a really lovely way, I think.
Yeah. And talking about different types of Danburite as well, I think, Nicholas, you were showing a Japanese Danburite before we jumped on.
I was talking about it.
Oh, you're talking about it.
Yeah. For those of us watching the video version, it's always the joke that the Aussies are color coordinated to match the crystals. So I was improvising. You can find some Japanese Danburites that are anywhere from like a pale champagne to like really transparent, saturated yellow to rival like the best Zambian citrine.
Yeah. And so for you and Danburites, how do you tend to work with them, or what do you find they're really great for?
This is one of those stones that I go through like cycles of forgetting and then cycles of like falling back in love with a crystal I haven't gotten to spend time with in a while. So I'm in this moment doing that with Danburite because it feels super timely in a lot of ways. One of my oldest favorites, I got this way back in the day when it was a few dollars and was just super happy. And then I've got my little blue Bolivian one. Um, and for me, Danburite works on a few levels. So the thesis statement is for me about balancing ecosystems and getting us in touch with a sense of belonging that is more than material. So on like the first level of this, we've got its crystal structure, which is orthorhombic. So we've got three crystal axes. They meet at right angles, but they're not all the same length. So that gives us this little rhombus or diamond-shaped cross section, most crystals of it. And this is a structure that yields a sense of dynamic balance, of being able to teeter-totter without losing our footing. It helps us learn to prioritize tasks, and it also teaches us a lesson about where we fit in and how to cultivate a sense of belonging. And that doesn't always emerge from where we are in, the coordinate plane of this 3D Earth, but how we fit into the spiritual ecosystem that's there. And this is a stone that I think a lot of folks who probably got into crystals around the time all of us did will remember, maybe the online hype of all four crystal sellers online at the time, talking about it being like a really shamanic stone, a stone of spiritual communication, a stone for opening our upper chakras. And I think that these really kind of come into alignment with this idea that when we open ourselves to experiencing not just the human world, but what we could deem the more than human world. That way we're not, prioritizing one over the other. They exist together. But when we widen our perspective, we're naturally going to be in a sense of communion or contact with beings that are not like us. They help us, Danburites help us find a way to live in harmony, not just with our fellow humankind, but the elemental spirits, the earth, the resources of plant and tree and creature and mineral. They also allow us to become more perceptive, more able to communicate with the realm of spirit And Kyle pointed this as well. Like, why is it such a great stone for psychics and mediums? Because we're communicating with the unseen worlds, with the more than human worlds, and we engage with that kind of work. So I think Danburite is such a wonderful ally for it. It becomes this like blessing, this ally that helps us. It's almost like a go-between for us and those other spheres of existence. So whether we want to communicate with angels or ancestors or long forgotten deities or just your own private spirit that inhabits that one tree stump in the forest behind your house, it's going to be the perfect ally for opening those doorways and building relationships to our helpers in spirit. Promotes a kind of healthy and thriving and balanced spiritual ecosystem because we are not doing more taking than we are giving. And that's also embodied in that crystal structure. It's the sense of reciprocity that we get from working with it. And when we live in that kind of way, when we are open to receiving those messages and living as we'll say relationally focused as possible, all of those beings in spirit, they step up because you've stepped up for them. So when we feel more isolated, more vulnerable, when we might be under attack in a spiritual sense or a socio-political kind of sense, we're never going to feel isolated when we open those doorways. And Danburite stands at the threshold, that kind of chisel shape we've all pointed to. It's like the end of the crowbar to like just prise open that doorway so we can just peek and see what's on the other side. And oftentimes just doing that is enough to recognize that we're supported everywhere we go. We're actually probably more supported than we think we need to be if only we will open ourselves to it. And so Danburite is such a great ally for me when I do feel alone, isolated, vulnerable, when it feels like I'm just not getting clear messages from my spirit team, my allies on the other side. And also, I think it's a really good one when we're skeptical of what we're going to find there, or maybe even a little bit afraid of it, because it is so gentle and loving and so filled with light. It's like holding a torch. So the kind of ecosystem we cultivate is one that is naturally going to be beneficial rather than one that's going to make us feel uncomfortable because it's ooky spooky.
I love what you shared there. That was really, really interesting. And I I love the play you were talking about, Nicholas, there about when with power. Like, this is considered a high vibration or a powerful crystal, but often powerful might seem the opposite to gentle. But I think there's a real power in Danburite in that way that it is gently powerful. Would you agree, Nicholas?
Yeah, there is a tenderness and a sweetness to it. I find that irrespective of its color, it always hits me right in the heart. Maybe other places as well, but it starts here. And it is reminding us, I think, that the glue that holds the spirit world together is the same thing that holds the fabric of the universe together, and that is love. We might experience that as light. We might experience that as healing. We could experience that as romance, like we talked about last week. But there is a very nurturing, loving quality that Danbright brings.
I would actually love to ask you all because this reminds me of something that comes up for me a lot. Um, and I think we could probably have pretty short answers, so we still have time for all the things we want to talk about. But do you find that you often have folks when they're asking you about like for a crystal suggestion that they'll say, "Well, what's the most powerful crystal for this or the most powerful crystal for that?" Like there's always this emphasis on power that I find so interesting because the most powerful isn't always the best. And like it's not always the best in every situation. Kyle, I see you definitely shaking your head. Is that something you've run into before?
Oh my goodness, over the however many years, if I've heard someone say, I want a piece of moldavite because I've heard it's the most powerful thing that's going to blah, 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 I might just fall off something high. It is never about the strength, because if it was always about the strength, then we would always be able to get things done through those avenues, right? it's about what do you need personally in the now? What do you need as far as that energy goes? And anyone that sees my weekly readings knows that when I give one card, I then give this whole plethora of crystals that you can work with, because everyone feels a little bit different. Everyone has a different connection. And I will say, if anyone wants a recommendation, I'll throw 5 at them. I will never throw just one crystal when someone asks for the most powerful or the best for this. I will say, which of these are you drawn to? Because all of these work on it in a different way. Like our 12 plus that we talked about for love last week, right? One word has so many connotations. Power has so many connotations. For me, the power of nurturing, natural agate, such an overlooked crystal and mineral, but it is so good. Like, I could go on and go on about, get over the idea of power being one thing. Feel into what you are drawn to and know that you will get the power that you need through your intention and the crystal that you are working with.
I love that explanation. Adam, is this something you've come up against as well?
Yeah, I think, a lot of the time when people are, we can all think of an experience in our lives where we've probably gone in like a bull in a china shop and it hasn't turned out well. So I'm always reminded of the saying, sometimes a gentle nudge is more powerful than a big shove. And I think, when we're talking about crystals like Danburite, they bring that kind of gentle energy in, which allows us to get a lot further along whatever we're trying to achieve rather than just trying to force our way through. There are crystals, Moldavite's a great example of that. I think phenakite is another one that for me has this kind of like thunderous kind of like energy. And that is great in certain contexts, but in others, we do need to go, well, how do I gently go in? And I think Danburite would be amazing for that. I do want to say, Kyle, you were saying that you throw 5 crystals at people. I'm not sure if I agree with that technique when you're reading, but apart from that, I love your readings on the Sunday, and everyone should try and catch them on Insta.
Thank you, definitely. Luckily, we have screens to hide behind.
Exactly. What about yourself, Nicholas? Do you find people wanting the powerful crystals?
I do, and I'm kind of a brat. I will flat out say, well, I'm not into superlatives, and here's why. The most powerful for this situation is not the most powerful in the next. My set of baggage requires a different workaround than yours. So let's start thinking about the most specific crystal rather than the most powerful crystal.
I love that approach for sure. One thing I find really interesting as well about how I think I discovered Danburite was many, many years ago when I was an eager student and trying to gobble up as much information as I could, and you'd Google and you'd buy books and all that type of thing, is I came across Robert Simmons' Synergy 12, which he listed as being the 12 most probably powerful crystals that are available on this planet. Now, I personally, with my 30 years of experience now, would probably remove at least 2 of those and swap them in with something else type of thing, but we can cover that at a later date. But that's what really opened up to me the power and the intrigue with clear crystals. Because as a crystal novice, we kind of just like, there's clear quartz. And, the other ones, well, white crystals got selenite and halite. But then, like Danburite, phenakite, naturalite, scholasite, all these, they very much, although in their structure, we've been talking about that wedge shape today, that really separates Danburite from recognizing it. But it really shows you that clear crystals can be really powerful. I'm scared to use that word now, but all in different ways. Has anyone else found that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Ashley,
Go
I'll
ahead,
let you
Kyle.
go.
Oh, I was just going to say, I find it so interesting you brought up this concept of the Synergy 12 atom, because this is something like you used to hear more about, but I feel like it's starting to make a little bit of a resurgence just fairly recently where people are kind of coming back to it. And the thing that always stands out to me is the idea of them being like quote unquote high vibration. So many people are into this concept of high vibration. And like when we consider like high vibration, powerful, it almost implies that there are crystals that are like low vibration. And I just that hasn't been my personal experience. So I always think about the early days of my own crystal journey, exploring like what other authors were talking about, what other folks were talking about, and finding, yeah, it introduced me to some new crystals. It got me excited and intrigued about some new crystals. But having a lot more years of experience under my belt now, I definitely feel what you think too, Adam, about like, yeah, there's some things I'd probably swap out on that list. But also I would really encourage people to question like this concept of like the most powerful and that like high vibration list and what is really meant by that, because just because those are a group of crystals that worked for one person's or even a group of people's like spiritual journey doesn't mean that those are necessarily going to be the exact right crystals for you. And it also doesn't make the crystals that you're intuitively chosen to assist you with that like wrong or incorrect. Like Kyle was saying earlier, like there are things that are going to be more right for you. But what were you going to say, Kyle?
For me, it basically plays off that. It's the idea that these were also written about, what was it, 20 years ago? The earth and culture and the world has evolved dramatically in 20 years. What we need as our most powerful allies are different. What was happening at that time was different. And crystals come out in waves of fashion of what we need, often in timely times. Someone will write about it, someone will bring it to the fore. It will become this thing that a lot of people are working with. Like an example of this is, of course, garnet for Victorian jewelry through like the late 1800s because of grieving, and jet as well. Like it was all about the darkness. It was all about these dark stones and nothing bright was worn, right? These fashions come and go. What people want come and go. And I think they were timely at that point in time. And what we find most powerful is going to be different to what the next person is and the next person is, and to what you felt 10 years ago and to what you're going to feel next week.
It's a really great point. And, speaking of power, we have a full moon in Leo coming up, which is definitely a powerful energy. Adam, what can you tell us about Danburite as it relates to that Leo full moon?
Yeah, so those that obviously have followed me on social media or heard past episodes will hear when I talk about the full moons that obviously each full moon is in a sign. Each sign represents a different aspect of life. Now, Leo, which is, anyone who knows a Leo, if you know a Leo, you'll know a Leo because they'll make sure that you know them. Yeah. They like to be, center and under the spotlight and that type of thing. And the Leo aspect of life is a really interesting one that I find a lot of the time gets dismissed behind some of the other aspects of life. So for me, Leo governs the aspect of life which governs pleasure, leisure, and play. Now, it does have a bit of a connection to children, so that inner child and that type of thing as well. So as you're listening to us right now, I'd really encourage you to think, how much space do you have in your life for fun, for leisure, for play? Normally what happens is once we've done all our work and looked after our family and looked after our health and done all those other things, then we just get to do something fun and leisurely in that type of way. One of my exes that I was with for quite a significant amount of time had Sun, Moon, and Mercury all in Leo. So I feel very well versed in the University of Leo. And one thing I found amazing, very big-hearted, very bold, very courageous, all those types of things, very hard-working. But once they'd got to, like, I've done my work for the day, they couldn't possibly get up and do another thing and help with dinner or anything like that. And that used to annoy me because I'm a bit of a workaholic and I don't stop type of thing. But I started to get the lesson of like, no, they're just really prioritizing. And if you think about a lion, yes, they're, powerful animals, but they're still cats and they flop around and lay around for a lot of time. So what do we do on this full moon? Well, this is a really great time to actually analyze how much fun's in your life. You're too busy adulting and getting things done that you don't actually just allocate time for pleasure. When we look at, people that live to 100, if you've looked into the blue zones, it's a really interesting concept where people in certain parts of the world have lived for longer. Those that have that social community, but also just take time to hang out with friends, and not do anything in particular, just chill and do something, it actually is good for our health and well-being. So I think Danburite works really, really well for this. For me, Danburite has almost a celebratory energy. And when we've talked about, Kyle's talked about wearing it a lot when you're doing readings, when you need that type of clarity as well. I would suggest that you actually grid it around your house. We often use clear quartz points, which have that point that send direct energy in. And, we've had great analogies for the Danburite points. We've had machetes, we've had crowbars. I think of them as little door wedges, and they kind of just leave the door open for the angels and all the blessings and the good times to come in. And so I would encourage you to work with Danburite, maybe charge some pieces on the full moon to bring a more fun and leisurely spirit into your space. And that could be at home, it could be at work, it could be wherever you want, and maybe 4 of them around that space just to invite that in as well. A final thing I want to share about Danburite is something I read once upon a time, and I don't know what the reasoning behind it is or where it came from, but I really liked it and it really resonated with me. And it said that Danburite is an amazing crystal to help you heal with your eyes. Now, a lot of the time when we think of healing, we think of, I'm a healer and I use my hands and I put energy through my hands or different things like that. But I want you to think about, and I still remember this experience from 25 years or so ago, sitting on a train and, minding my own business, and someone got off at a station, and as they got off, they just turned around and looked at me, and I actually can't remember what they looked like now, but I still remember their eyes, and their eyes were just almost angelic in this manner, and it was just so uplifting. In one glance, I felt uplifted. And I think, when we talk about the fact that the eyes are the windows to the soul, this crystal could be a really powerful one at helping to cleanse our spirit, bring in that gentleness, bring in that clarity that basically our eyes sparkle. And just by looking at people, you light them up. And so I'd really encourage people to play around with that. Leo is a leadership type of energy. And imagine if you could lead with your eyes and inspire people with that little twinkle and spark in your eyes. And Danburite may be able to help you with that. So it's the perfect crystal to work with this week. So I think we've kind of explored Danburite fully. I know some of you are very excited about Tucson. I should say, if anyone's wondering why we're talking about Tucson, am I right in saying it's definitely the biggest gem fair where all these people from around the world come in America? Is it the biggest in the world, or is there a big? It is the biggest in the world. I know Europe has some big ones as well.
I've heard hot debate that it was second and it is now first, and I would say that's probably true.
Yeah, it's an amazing experience. If you're in the USA, if you love crystals, you need to start saving up your pennies because it happens late January, early February each year. So it's worth going, and you can just go down as a retail shopper and buy a couple of goodies. But yeah, leave your credit cards at home. I've been over a couple of times and you get into trouble on that. But it's amazing. And even if you're a crystal lover, even if you think about maybe visiting the USA one day or just want a crystal trip, it'd be a great place to go to.
And I would love to invite everyone, if you aren't able to make it to the show in person and you want to see some of the great things that I've picked out for my shop, you can join us for an upcoming live sale. Our next one will be just a couple days after this episode airs on February 13th, the US time. So you can head to Mimosa Spirit on Instagram and head to the link in bio to RSVP for our upcoming lives.
Amazing. We'll be back next week to explore another crystal. I'm wondering one day whether we should go head to head on creating our own Synergy 12s. That could be a very interesting, very long and very messy episode. But if you're up for it, let us know in the comments because we're here for you and to serve our crystal community. And we love hearing from you. Thank you so much for all the positive feedback. I know that so many people were intrigued in the 12 crystals that we chose for love. It opened up some conversations there. And that was amazing to hear your feedback and your suggestions as well. Until next week. Enjoy your crystals, enjoy the full moon, and we'll see you then. Blessed be.